What did Vikram Seth feel in Kathmandu? Febrile confusion or a sense of stillness? What did he find so peculiar that he compared it to the quills of porcupine? What was the belief at the Pashupatinath temple about the end of Kali Yuga? Welcome to Miss Rose Classroom. Now today we are going to study the chapter Kathmandu written by Vikram Seth. Chapter 10 Kathmandu is a small excerpt from Vikram Seth's book named Heaven Lake. It is a travelogue, a book, an account detailing his experiences as a traveler from China to India via Tibet and Nepal. Let's begin with the chapter. I get a cheap room in the center of town and sleep for hours. The next morning, with Mr. Shah's son and nephew, I visit the two temples in Kathmandu that are most sacred to Hindus and Buddhists. The author Vikram Seth has got himself a cheap room, meaning a room that was not very pricey. He's also telling you that he wasn't alone but was accompanied by Mr. Shah's son and nephew. And together they were going to visit two very famous temples in Kathmandu that were sacred to two dharmic communities, that is, Hindus and Buddhists. At Pashupatinath, outside which a sign proclaims entrance for the Hindus only, there is an atmosphere of febrile confusion. Priests, hawkers, devotees, tourists, cows, monkeys, pigeons and dogs roam through the grounds. We offer a few flowers. There are so many worshippers that some people trying to get the priest's attention are elbowed aside by others pushing their way to the front. A princess of the Nepalese royal house appears. Everyone bows and makes way. By the main gate, a party of saffron-clad Westerners struggle for permission to enter. The policeman is not convinced that they are Hindus. Only Hindus are allowed to enter the temple. A fight breaks out between two monkeys. One chases the other, who jumps onto a shivling, then runs screaming around the temples and down to the river, the holy Bagmati, that flows below. A corpse is being cremated on its banks. Washerwomen are at their work and children bathe. From a balcony, a basket of flowers and leaves, old offerings now wilted, is dropped onto the river. A small shrine half protrudes from the stone platform on the river bank. When it emerges fully, the goddess inside will escape and the evil period of the Kali Yuga will end on earth. In paragraph 2, the author is narrating the character and atmosphere of the place, in short, ambience of the city Kathmandu. He begins with Pashupatinath temple and he uses the term febrile confusion. Now what do you understand by this term? By using this term febrile confusion, Vikram Seth is detailing the atmosphere characterized by a great deal of energy, excitement, movement and chaos. At Pashupatinath temple, he is describing what he is seeing. There is a sign declaring that only Hindus are allowed to enter this temple. People of various trades and designations like priests, hawkers, devotees, etc. are crowding the place. Even animals, they too are moving freely around the place. Vikram Seth's group, they too wish to offer some flowers to the deity, but since there are so many worshippers and everybody is trying to get the priest's attention, there is a lot more jostling going around. Further, he is witnessing a princess from Nepalese royal household enter the temple and everybody is very quick to make way for her. A policeman has noticed a few saffron-clad Westerners trying to enter the temple, and since only Hindus are allowed, he is not sure of their Hindu identity. Saffron-clad Westerners. Here the indication is towards Westerners who have adopted Hinduism as their religion. Keeping it quite precise and short, Vikram Seth in his travelogue is presenting the reader with minute details and settings. Details that most of us rarely register while moving from one place to another. In short, quick succession of scenes, he is showing many things. Example, two monkeys chasing each other and creating a ruckus down the river Bagmati. From there, description of ordinary life, washerwoman washing the clothes, children bathing, contrasted against a body being cremated on the riverbank. Wilted offerings being dropped into the river, and from there the legend of the goddess. A belief that the small shrine protruding from the stone platform houses a goddess, and when the whole shrine will emerge out of the water, she will escape and the era of evil Kali Yuga will finally end. Let's move to paragraph 3. At the Bodhnath Stupa, the Buddhist shrine of Kathmandu, there is, in contrast, a sense of stillness. Its immense white dome is ringed by a road. Small shops stand on its outer edge. Many of these are owned by Tibetan immigrants. Felt bags, Tibetan prints, and silver jewelry can be bought here. There are no crowds. This is a haven of quietness in the busy streets around. In the third paragraph, we are moving to a different location. Vikram Seth is at the Bodhnath Stupa, which is a Buddhist shrine. In comparison to Pashupatinath temple, he finds a contrast over here. Remember, at the Pashupatinath temple, he felt a sense of febrile confusion, febrile energy mixed with chaos and excitement. But over here, there is a sense of stillness and a sense of calmness and peace. Its huge white dome is circled by roads where small shops, primarily owned by Tibetan immigrants, are selling bags, jewelry, and textiles. Again, he is noticing the difference. This area around the stupa is not littered with people, not crowded by them. The vicinity around the stupa is much calmer and peaceful than the other busy streets of Kathmandu. Kathmandu is vivid, mercenary, religious, with small shrines to flower-adorned deities along the narrowest and busiest streets. With fruit sellers, flute sellers, hawkers of postcards, shops selling Western cosmetics, film rolls and chocolate, or copper utensils and Nepalese antiques. Film songs blare out from the radio, car horns sound, bicycle bells ring, stray cows low questioningly at motorcycles. Vendors shout out their wares. I indulge myself mindlessly, buy a bar of marzipan, a corn on the cob roasted in a charcoal brazier, on the pavement rubbed with salt, chili powder and lemon, a couple of love story comics, and even a Reader's Digest. All this I wash down with Coca-Cola and a nauseating orange drink and feel much the better for it. In paragraph 4, Vikram Seth uses certain adjectives for Kathmandu. He says that Kathmandu is vivid, meaning a place that produces very clear, powerful and detailed images in the mind of a traveler. He says it's mercenary, meaning since it's a tourist destination, it is by default quite mercenary, money-oriented or business-oriented, where everyone is trying to get the most out of a heavy tourist traffic. Vikram adds another adjective. He says that it's religious. Why? Because you can bear witness that even the narrowest of lanes is decorated by many shrines of various deities. He continues the paragraph with vivid visual descriptions of Kathmandu streets, from fruits to cosmetics to Nepalese antiques, from shop owners to street hawkers, everyone is trying to sell something. Very efficiently, he is building a mental picture in the reader's minds. Now, Vikram Seth is describing what he is hearing. He hears cows lowing, vendors shouting, car horns blaring, motorcycles and even film songs blaring out from a radio. From Heaven Lake was first published in 1983, hence the mention of the old technology that is the radio. After hungrily taking in all the visual auditory stimulation, the author decides to sate his hunger for food. He indulges himself, pampers himself by buying cheap common delicacies available on the street. Also, to fill in the void in between his travels, he decides to buy a few magazines and comics to read. I consider what route I should take back home. If I were propelled by enthusiasm for travel per se, I would go by bus and train to Patna, then sail up the Ganges past Banaras to Allahabad, then up the Yamuna past Agra to Delhi. but I am too exhausted and homesick. Today is the last day of August. Go home, I tell myself. Move directly towards home. I enter a Nepal Airlines office and buy a ticket for tomorrow's flight. In paragraph 5, Vikram Seth is trying to decide what route he should take to reach back home. If I were propelled by enthusiasm, meaning if his sole motivation was his enthusiasm for travel, then he would surely opt for a bus or a train ride to Patna, and from there he would sail from Banaras to Delhi. But he tells the readers that he doesn't wish to do that since he is frankly quite exhausted and homesick. Finally, he directs himself to head straight home and buys the quickest possible means to do so, that is, by air. I look at the flute seller standing in a corner of the square near the hotel. In his hand is a pole with an attachment at the top from which 50 or 60 bansuris protrude in all the directions, like the quills of a porcupine. They are of bamboo, they are cross flutes and recorders. From time to time he stands the pole on the ground, selects a flute and plays for a few minutes. The sound rises clearly above the noise of the traffic and the hawkers' cries. He plays slowly, meditatively, without excessive display. He does not shout out his wares. Occasionally he makes a sale, but in a curiously offhanded way, as if this were incidental to his enterprise. Sometimes he breaks off playing to talk to the fruit seller. I imagine that this has been the pattern of his life for years. After purchasing his flight ticket, the author notices a flute seller standing at a corner. He sees all the bansuris tied in a bunch to a pole. To him, they resemble to the quills of a porcupine. Simile is used over here to compare. Further, author notices that from time to time the bansuri seller stands the pole down and randomly selects a bansuri to play. The flute seller plays the bansuri without any excessive display of skill and performance. He plays thoughtfully, slowly, meditatively. Unlike the other vendors and hawkers who are shouting out their wares to make a sale, the flute seller doesn't do so. What Vikram Seth finds peculiar about the flute seller is that he is not as aggressive in his approach to make a sale unlike the others. He does make an occasional sale, but his manner is so unbothered that Vikram Seth underlines this by saying as if it were incidental to his enterprise, meaning as if the sale of his flutes is secondary to his trade. The paragraph ends with an assumption from the author's part that probably so far this has been the pattern of the flute seller's life for years. I find it difficult to tear myself away from the square. Flute music always does this to me. It is at once the most universal and most particular of sounds. There is no culture that does not have its flute. The reed ney, the recorder, the Japanese shakuhachi, the deep bansuri of Hindustani classical music, the clear or breathy flutes of South America, the high-pitched Chinese flutes. Each has its specific fingering and compass. It weaves its own associations. Yet to hear any flute is, it seems to me, to be drawn into the commonality of all mankind, to be moved by music closest in its phrases and sentences to the human voice. Its motive force too is living breath. It too needs to pause and breathe before it can go on. Paragraph 7 begins with his unwillingness to move away from the square where the flute seller is playing. Precisely, it is the sound of the flute that is keeping him there. He is saying that flute music always transports him to a different sphere in his mind. He adds that music from the flute is at once the most universal and particular of sounds. How? Commonality and universal element is there when we see several cultures having their own version of a flute. Europe, South America, China, India, Japan, they all have their own version of the wind instrument. Peculiarity comes when all these versions of flutes possess their individual style, technique, and range of playing. At the end of the paragraph, Vikram Seth has gone quite expressive with his words. He says that one can't help but be drawn to the sound of a flute. Its sound is the most closest thing we have to phrases and songs uttered by the human voice. It too, like human voice, draws its motive force, its driving force through the living breath. Like human voice, the sound of a flute too is entirely dependent on the pauses and constant breath for it to make complete sense. Paragraph 8. That I can be so affected by a few familiar phrases on the bansuri surprises me at first. For on the previous occasions that I have returned home after a long absence abroad, I have hardly noticed such details, and certainly have not invested them with the significance I now do. In paragraph 8, the narrator is quite surprised to find himself so affected by the sound of a flute. He feels that earlier things like this never registered to him. He never attached any importance to such simple, often unseen things. The chapter is ending on an allusion, a suggestion that it is probably the enrichment of the author's senses through this particular travel that now he is able to notice such minute, intricate details. Prior to this journey in his previous travels, he never attached any significance to small details. This concludes our today's session. I hope you liked the narration and explanation of the excerpt Kathmandu taken from Heaven Lake. Do leave a comment if you liked it. Until next time, thank you for returning back to the channel.